As I have said before, sometimes creativity and creative people are all around and we overlook them. I don't want to say they are right under our noses, but the other day I realized that someone I email every week or so is someone I haven't interviewed yet. And I'm still not sure why that's the case and what my holdup was. Like our last guest, today's guest is a visual artist, but I also learned he is branching out into other things. Today, we talk with Brad Wilson of Cleveland, Tennessee, about art, teaching, and being a first-time novelist on Dialogues with Creators. Welcome to the podcast, Brad.
Well, thank you, Barbara. Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Should I call you Bradley or Brad?
Either's fine. Most people call me Bradley, but I go by both.
Oh, okay. I'll be more.
If you're used to Brad, that's fine.
So before we started, we were talking about dogs. So I want to learn more about your dogs as we get into knowing you. You say that you and your wife have a rescue sanctuary for dogs kind of thing?
Yeah, we started, kind of unknowingly started this in 2002 when my wife was on her way to work and there was a little Yorkie running alongside the highway. And so she stopped, rescued it and took it to a vet. There was no chip and he was Max, and we ended up having him until, I don't know, maybe 16 or 17 years. He died in, I think, 27. And but he was such a good boy. But since then, we've all our dogs are pretty small, so we don't do big dogs. So we have 17 total, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot. Mm-hmm. But they're all pretty small. Most of them are under 10 pounds, and most of them are seniors, and they just sleep all the time. Mm-hmm. So as far as like the expenses, the biggest expense is obviously vet care. They don't even eat that much, really. I mean, we spend under $150 a month on food for them. But it's the vet thing that's kind of the big expense. But we've got this wonderful vet who knows our situation, and she really gives us she makes it this doable for us as far as medical expenses.
Okay. Do you live in the country?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. That would help.
Yeah, I live right outside of Cleveland in Charleston, Tennessee, which is still in Bradley County, and it's I think it's a population of 650, and there is a high school here, and we live kind of right behind the high school, and it's the high school that my wife is a teacher at. So, but it sounds like it is out in the country, but it sounds like a school being nearby that it wouldn't. But they built the school in the middle of a field 20 years ago, so.
Okay. And so that's why we're hearing puppies in the back. So if you hear doggy barks, it's not a mistake. It's because they have 17 dogs, you said? Okay. That's a lot of dogs. And do you ever lose track of their names?
Well, we have in the kitchen. We painted our kitchen with that paint where you can write on it with chalk.
Okay.
And so So we have their names all listed down, but, if we acquire a new animal or if one passes, that's kind of sad. We wipe their name off the wall and then we will add a new dog as they come in. So, but that we have to have that, or sometimes I really can't, even if I'm trying to consciously list all their names, I'll forget one or two.
Sure. So where do you get them from?
Different places. Recently, we've gotten a lot from the McMinn County, or not a lot, but several from the McMinn County Animal Shelter, and then the SPCA here in Bradley County. And then we used to, years and years ago, foster for dogs. And we still have some groups and some foster people that we know, and they'll contact us if they got a situation that they think an animal would work well with us and what we've got going.
Did you get them when they're older?
Yeah,
usually. Okay.
Yeah, usually. I mean, I would say at the youngest 7, 8, 9, with like 10, and then we've got several that are 15, 16, and 17.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So,
You said your Yorkie lived 17 years, and it must have been pretty young when you got it.
he must have been, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when you take them to the vet for the first time. I think they just, if they don't know, and it's an adult and their teeth are clean and their eyes are clear, they say it's 2 years old.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I have big dogs, but they're not super big, but one is over 70 pounds and the other one's about 55 to 60. So little dogs are interesting to me, but I don't know that I'd ever own one. Little ones. Yeah, I kind of like the big ones, although the big ones can be rough to deal with, as I had an experience today, as I told you about. Well, anyway, we didn't really get on your talk dogs, but my goal here is to ask a few questions and let you talk. So I'll keep in the background because you have a lot to say. Tell us about your start as a visual artist.
Sure. I was a high school freshman, and I had an art teacher that Lolly Durant, who's a Chattanooga artist. And she was my 8th grade art teacher, and we even teach together now at Lee University. We're both in the art department there. So that's kind of neat how that has happened. But so I had her, which in middle school art, which, you do what you can, you get the kids maybe whatever for 6 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever it is. And then I had a high school art teacher, Bud Ellis, who was the man who kind of started the carousel at Coolidge Park. He was the wood carver.
Yeah.
So when I was in high school, he would get these old carousel horses and repair them and fix them up.
Mm-hmm.
And he modeled this kind of, this life of a creator, which is something I had never seen. He taught, but he also would work in front of us at school. And I thought, that for me, I want to, and I was not particularly good in academics. And but I really clicked with his class because it was making stuff and it was hands-on. And then once I graduated, I decided I really never wanted a career in anything. Like I knew I was going to have a job, but the idea of a career just has never been appealing to me. So I studied painting, which is, of course, not one of the fields that you can go out and get a high paying job in immediately after graduation. So I went to graduate school, and then I studied with a great painter, Jerry Allen, there at the University of Mississippi. And then it was there that they offered me a teaching assistantship. And so I got to do that. And I thought, well, I like teaching and I can't really think of anything else I would want to do. So I graduated, moved to Colorado for a year, and I just kind of landed this part-time job at a community college outside of Denver. And was there for a year, and then eventually wound up in Alabama teaching at a community college, teaching art. And but this whole time of teaching and the creating were always kind of I definitely had to have the art making part. So it's one thing, not that I've been especially successful by whatever standards, but I have been able to maintain kind of a creative life throughout my adult years. So I think that's something that I wanted from the get-go. So I knew I wanted a creative life. I knew I didn't want kind of a traditional life, like I didn't want a career. I knew pretty early on in my early 20s I didn't want children. Nothing wrong with children. And I'd been around children. My sisters who are older had children, and I got to be around them when they were babies. And so it was I just kind of wanted something. I don't know. I probably would just be ill-suited in any other type of job because I don't, I think maybe even with teaching, I love teaching and I love working with students that you probably know better than anybody. When it comes to like that other side, kind of like the administrative tasks and things like that. I am not always on top of the ball with that stuff. And it's not because, I'm trying to be a pain to my supervisors. It's just my brain. I'm just wired in a way where I don't even think, I don't know, it just doesn't. And I say that is kind of an excuse, and I don't mean it as an excuse, but that is one of my areas that are probably a little bit more challenging for me is anything in the realm of the practical. So,
that's an interesting viewpoint. There's practical and then there's practical. Some of the stuff that we have to do administratively is just stuff we have to do administratively. It's practical value. Well, I shouldn't say too much. I might get in trouble, but its immediate practical value is sometimes maybe an enigma. I mean, I know it has some value somewhere down the line, but yeah, I know you're not the only professor I've worked with though who was very creative and could do amazing things artistically, who just didn't get into that kind of, administrative stuff. I've worked with other people like that. And I understand it. It's just, we're all kind of wired a little differently in how we see things, which is kind of where I wanted to go with this. So you were in Alabama teaching, and then how long were you there?
I was in Alabama for 9 years. I met my wife there. She was a teacher, or she was in college to be a teacher, to be an art teacher. And then I eventually, when I was in Alabama, so I was teaching again part-time at like 2 different universities, community college and one university. And then I landed a job in teaching public school art at an elementary school, but I had to, even though I had a master's degree, I had to go back and take some more courses and take the praxis and get all the requirements and get all the credentials, I guess, for being able to teach, being a certified. And I did that for 3 years, and I made probably all the mistakes. I was probably not a great public school teacher. And I still have students that I'm friends with, like this was 20 some years ago. So I still have students from then that, they're now in their 30s, I guess, or maybe even a little older, but, well, no, they wouldn't be older, but, yeah, I just don't think that I just wasn't really good at that. I love teaching, and I love teaching college students, and I love teaching, my adult students that I teach at the Creative Arts Guild. And then I also teach at, John Campbell Folk School in Brasstown, North Carolina, which is an incredible place to take a class or to teach a class.
Yeah, we're going to get into that a little bit because I'm fascinated with that place. I remember you sent me a card a while back with one of your paintings on it. I think it was like a king. A painting, a king was kind of a gold.
Yeah. I remember that, yeah.
So is that something as far as making cards or making stationery or posters or something that you do?
No, I've only done that once.
Okay.
And with one of my pieces of art, that was with my dog. But the cards that I had sent you, I had a friend who had made those for me. And I think specifically because this friend wanted like receiving letters and stuff. So in the mail. So, I kind of did that for a while. I would, write one letter a week to send to friends and people. I thought that would just be a good practice to maintain.
Yeah, it is.
It has fallen by the wayside in recent years. I would like to start that back up.
So I have a one and only Bradley Wilson card.
Yeah, you better hang on to it.
I will. Now that I kept it. Because I knew it had to be something unusual. Okay. So
we're going to make a card of my art. That is not the image I would have chosen.
But you gave it to him, right? To do that with it?
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, the guy that did that, he was my, I showed a gallery in Nashville, and he's the gallery owner.
Oh,
We're also friends, and he's just into that kind of stuff, corresponding, with letters and cards, and it's a great thing. It's one of those things that you want to do and you really intend to do, but it's one of the first things, those things that go when you get kind of busy.
excuse me. Okay. Get that out of my system. Okay. So if I went to your gallery on your website, I assume that's not all your paintings, though, is it?
What is it? Bradley Wilson paintings?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. So I've got a website. I also have another website that's I'm working on, but it's not. I haven't really told. I didn't know if you had found this new website that I'm working on.
Oh no.
It's also going to include the visual art and the images. But yeah, that's kind of more typical, I guess, the stuff that's on the website that you're looking at as far as my work goes. It's
all right. So, but it's not all of your paintings. It's a sample of them. Okay, I would think not. So, if someone would see a gallery of your paintings, of Bradley Wilson's paintings, what would they see? This is the artist statement part. What would they see?
Well, I think they would see work that's probably subject matter wise more concerned with subjects from nature, people, animals, trees, landscapes. Not really into architecture all that much, even though I'll do paintings that will have buildings in them. And then like still life, I will run in the opposite direction of the still life. It just doesn't, like inanimate objects just kind of sitting around for whatever reason. It's a legitimate subject for a lot of artists, but for me, it just doesn't interest me. So I think you would see a lot of kind of nature related subject matter. I think you would see probably a lot of color. You would see not a lot of detail. I'm not a detail person, but a lot of kind of, I'm really interested in gesture and movement, especially as it relates to living things. Like even when an elephant is standing still, it's like moving, it has this slow motion to it. So like all living things have this kind of spark of life. And then I'm interested in trying to capture that, because with that not capturing, if you failed to capture that, you end up with something. You can have all the details in place, but it would look like a wax museum person. If you see, you can get all the details right, but if you don't have that sense of movement or gesture and a human figure of all things, it's just not. It's going to look creepy. It'll look lifeless. So that's what I would hope I would hope that people would see paintings that have that kind of energy. Of kind of that spark of life, I guess, that gesture that is in living things. I think about that when I'm painting. That's one of the things I kind of consciously think about.
Okay, that's interesting. People want to put an ism word on an artist's work, and based on your author statement and what is in your gallery, both online and in the collective sense of all your paintings, do you follow an ism? Or are you doing something else? You know what I mean by an ism?
Yeah, no, I don't really cling to any particular kind of movements, tenets or, whatever they were kind of trying to go by. I kind of steal from whatever just kind of interests me in the moment. I guess it's more a matter of just kind of, I don't know. I definitely don't think about an ism. And as far as like having a philosophy of my painting, it's just to be, like uncertainty is a major element of life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also a major part of art making. And a lot of people in life and in art making figure out ways to kind of minimize uncertainty. But for me, I definitely think in my life, I want to minimize it to some degree. But in my artwork, I want to be completely like, I don't want to know what's going on. I want to be surprised by what I'm doing. So when I paint, and I write very differently than I paint, but when I paint, I do not have an idea. I do not have a concept. I just start pushing paint around, and then whatever kind of develops intuitively out of that process is what I go with. If I find or develop an image that is interesting to me or looks, again, it's that element of surprise. I want to like go, oh wow, I would have never thought to paint that from the front end.
Okay.
So yeah, I like to be surprised with my own work. And if I come up with, if I sat down and say, okay, I'm going to paint a dog, as much as I like dogs, if I have that, then you draw it out, and then you're just kind of, it's almost like a coloring page, or paint by number, you're just kind of filling it in. And again, that's just for me, because a lot of painters do paint like that. And I'm not trying to say that's not a legitimate way to paint. It's just for me, it bores me. And then I have even though I do commission pieces, and I just finished one fairly recently, it's such a, I don't do well with them. I mean, I get angry at myself during the whole painting process for accepting it in the first place.
Yeah. So someone in a commission, they would say, I want a painting of a certain thing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. It's interesting because the last person who will be on right before you, when yours comes out, this podcast comes out, as she was a portraitist, and she worked at she lived in Tuscaloosa, and she really wasn't affiliated with the university, but her husband did. He taught there, and so she would get commissions to do portraits, and so she was a realist. I mean, if you're doing a portrait, there has to be, I mean, there's a style to it, but you have to make it look like the person realistically. It can't be too abstract or too impressionistic, because people are going to say that doesn't look like me. And we talked about that on the podcast then we talked about also privately about people who had not been happy with how someone in their family was portrayed, so and it took them a while either to get used to it, or they never did get used to it. So yeah. Now, when I was looking at your paintings, one thing I saw was color, and I'm going to say it was an unusual color, like deep blue pine trees. Mm-hmm. Am I saying that correctly? Am I seeing that correctly?
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's local color, which is a term in art that means you paint things kind of the color you normally associate them being, is like grass green and skies blue and that kind of thing. But then there's also interpretive color, and I don't really like, I'll do in the same painting have local color and interpretive color, or all interpretive color, and sometimes even all local color. So to me, it seems like if I want to paint something a certain color, I don't like whatever color I normally think of that thing as being. If I want to paint the sky green or something like that, I just go for it, because it's just a painting. It's just colored goo, pushed around on a piece of fabric and in layers, and it's composed, it's arranged, but there's also, I'm not going to put like, and I know a lot of people like this, but I don't put these kind of arbitrary rules or whatever like on my art. I just let whatever the painting needs, then that's what we go with.
But how do you know when it's done? That's always my question. How do you know when it's done? How do you know when a book's done?
I don't think books ever get done.
Probably not.
I've had this conversation with a lot of different artists, and it seems to be like one of the things that kind of is a consensus is that when you catch yourself going one more thing, just one more thing, when you're painting, that means it's time to set the brush down, because you are in dangerous territory. What that means is that you're having fun with what you're doing. You're liking what you've got, and you don't want the good times to stop. So you keep saying one more thing. And then what you end up doing, and I've done this so many times, is you push it right into this new territory of utter disappointment. You overwork it, or you paint something. Something was painted with just enough, just enough information, and then you go in there and you add all this detail, and it just completely, takes the life out of it.
Listeners, I love doing this podcast. I hope deeply that you also enjoy listening. As we bring this content free of charge, I have some requests that will help it continue. We have exceeded 2,000 listens for the 24 guests and 30 episodes. That doesn't include the YouTube listens. And none of it would have happened without Clemencia Villafuerte, our producer. I have to say that. I depend on her a great deal. In some ways, that number's great because I don't do much advertising or promotion. I depend on listeners to repost on social media and for the guests to post the links on their websites. On the other hand, it's really pretty low as the podcast world goes. Really, really low. So I can't monetize it, at least not yet. That's good and bad. You all don't have to listen to random commercials about who knows what. Yay! And I don't have any financial help. Boo. So here are the asks, as the trendy people say now. I'm not sure what was wrong with the word requests, but number 1, keep telling folks about this podcast. Even if it's just one that you particularly cared for, tell them about that one and they might get interested in the others. Of course, keep listening. 3rd, and here's the commercial part, buy my books to offset the costs of the podcast. I don't talk about them much because I'm really terrible at marketing. I have several novels available on Amazon. You can look them up under Barbara G. Tucker or Barbara Graham Tucker, as in Graham Cracker, rolling my eyes. Or you can ask me for signed copies. The most recent, Sudden Future, by Colorful Crow Publishing, would make a great Christmas gift for a reader of any age. I will have another coming out before Christmas, Long Lost Justice. Others are Bringing Abundance Back, which I call the Southern Chick Lit book, Long Lost Family, a not-so-cozy mystery, Long Lost Promise, even less cozy. I haven't figured out how murders can be cozy. And The Unexpected Christmas Visitors, a story about refugees. All are on Kindle, too. Also, I have short Bible studies. I'm not at the GoFundMe point yet. Finally, buy the books of the folks I've interviewed here or will. Luke Manjay of Ginseng Diggers, Becky Woolley, Ray Atkins, Kami Ballantyne, Devereaux Shivington-Stebbins, Susan Kirkland, Renee Winchester, Carly Land, David Cady, Millicent Flake, Noah Knox Marshall, and Amber Nagel. You are a person interested in the artistic community of Chattanooga, Northwest Georgia, and beyond. Help them out. Thank you for listening to this commercial. So do you use acrylic or oils or both? Or
as an undergraduate and graduate student, I used oil paints, but with all our dogs, and we have with all our dogs, I can't have oil paints in the house because they dry slow. It can take weeks for oil paint to dry. And then we have our dogs. We kind of have almost like a compound. We live in a small little country house, but we have another building out there that's my wife's sewing studio. And then we have another bigger building that's a painting studio, a wood shop, and a pottery studio. A lot of different art forms. And then the dogs just kind of come and go in those spaces with us.
Oh, okay.
And so we kind of have to make those spaces pet friendly.
Interesting. You don't paint a lot of dogs, though, I take it.
I like to paint dogs.
Okay.
There just might not be any on the website. Really, when you had asked, is that all my paintings? Up until I started writing a few years ago, I probably would make 50 to 60 paintings a year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So,
yeah.
I don't claim to be a good painter, but I will say this: I'm a fast painter.
Yeah. The one painting I saw that I liked. I like a lot of them, but I really like the one. I guess it's a barn or a shed, and it's next to a field. And I kind of took that the field there was snow on the ground, but then there was red. Like red rose of something, and the sun was very red. And I really liked that one, and I don't want to compare, but it had a kind of a Van Gogh quality for me, so I've been to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and it just reminded me of that. I like that one. And I noticed also on one of your paintings online that it looked like you have really thick brush strokes. Is that?
Yes, I do use. I paint with brushes, but I also paint probably more often with palette knives.
Yeah.
With palette knives, it's real easy to get into that impasto, that thick paint, and kind of pile it on, and so it uses up a lot more paint that way. So you kind of figure out ways to make it where you only use kind of palette knife towards the end, or otherwise you're going to just like use up all your paints on one paint. But so palette knife, I do like thick paint. I'm not a big fan of, with acrylic, I don't, you can work, acrylic is so versatile. You can use it like watercolor, you can water it down a great deal and make it transparent. It's like a controlled stain. Or you can work with it very thickly, like oil paints. And I guess maybe because I just, my formal training in visual art was with oil paints. And so I've used them kind of thickly, and that's just kind of carried over when I eventually switched to acrylic. And acrylic has a lot of advantages. Oil paint, you have to abide by technical rules of your painting, or there's this rule called fat over lean, where you have to paint more oily layers on top of less oily layers, or dry at different rates. And that's when you start getting the crackling effect and all this kind of problems. And it was just one of those things that I don't want to think, I can't, it was like, I have to think about chemistry now when I'm painting. And I just couldn't do that. With acrylic, you can just paint whatever you want. There's really, as long as it's not on an oily surface, acrylic paint will last through a nuclear holocaust. So,
yeah. And that's kind of like trying to make a connection. It's like people just think, oh, you paint, but the tools and the texture and the medium has a certain influence or even control over what you can do, and it's like a poet. If a poet says, I'm going to write a sonnet, okay, or one of those more obscure types of poems that I don't know all of their names, a tarantella or something like that. I think that's maybe a kind of poem. I could be wrong. That they agree to abide by certain rules, and they can't break the rule once they say they're going to do a sonnet. It has to be a certain way. And that always amazes me how people can, that's why I write novels, because there aren't as many rules. You got to have some rules, but you don't have to be constrained to just having 10 syllables in a line, 14 lines if you want to say more. But those who do it are, they do it brilliantly, and you whatever. So I'd like to explain here to those who are listening why I happen to know Bradley. Okay. He teaches art appreciation at Dalton State College. And that is in my department, the Department of Communication, Performing Arts, and Foreign Language. He also teaches art at Lee University. What do you teach there? Painting?
I teach visual. I've taught a lot of things there. I teach visual art, studio art courses, as well as art history courses.
Okay.
And so as far as the studio classes, I've taught beginning, like the low level painting classes. I've taught the upper level drawing, printmaking, and watercolor. And I'm not a watercolorist really, but I taught it and hopefully did a decent job at it. But yeah, it's kind of, it's a small department and you kind of go where you're needed. And I'm happy to do it. The students there are, they're great students, just like the students at Dalton State are great. That's probably the best part of any teaching job is getting to work with the students.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially in that way, if you have small classes and there are people that have, very similar interests that you would have. It's almost like a mentor apprenticeship kind of a deal like that. So how do you go about teaching someone to paint? You also teach, as you mentioned, at the is it John C. Campbell or John Campbell?
Well, I think the official name is John C. Campbell Folk School. Okay.
In Brasstown, North Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you get hooked up with them?
I had learned about the school, and this was when I was living in Alabama, and my wife actually wanted to go there to take a class. And so we somehow found I think my wife or I, we found a catalog. And then there was one sitting around somewhere. And that's, I think, how we learned about it. And then my wife went and took a class. And when she came back, she said, you need to teach at this place. So I went and took a class just to kind of check out the scene, see what it was. And then as soon as I got back, I put together a class proposal or a workshop proposal for a 1 week class and sent it in as, along with all the things you have to submit with it, like a resume and images. And I sent examples of student work too, just I wanted to make sure I had enough stuff there that they could see that, if you send in incomplete stuff or just stuff that's kind of halfway done, it kind of appears that you don't really want to teach there that much. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to have a good, strong initial presentation to turn in. And then so I sent that in, and then they booked that back then anyways, they would book 2 years in advance. So I finally taught there in 2012. And then after that, I was going 4 times a year, 4 weeks a year, not consecutively, but like throughout the year, a week-long class. And that went for years, and that was such a fun, it's just like going to camp for a week. And I was teaching, I was working, but it was fun work. But now I only go next year. I'm only going one week. It's kind of hard with our dog situation. It's really hard when one of my wife or I are gone, because it puts in the entire load of the responsibility for taking care of the dogs on that one person. Mm-hmm. And it's when you're getting up in the morning and you're having to get up and go to work and get everything together and get everybody fed. It just having 2 people doing that, it just works so much better than one person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you start to teach a class of painting, what do you actually do first? Is it about teaching people to see a certain way?
Wow, that's a really good question. So what I try to do is you make an objective that's very kind of clear for them to understand. So you say, we're going to draw a portrait using only shapes, lines and shapes. We're not going to use color. We're not going to use everything. We're not going to use, we're not going to really focus on texture or anything like that. Just lines and shapes. And then let me read back up here. So when it's a total beginner student, it's a balance thing, because you want them to enjoy the process. there's so many ways that beginners can get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to you kind of have to tell them from the get-go, don't even have it in your mind that you're going to make a great painting, and you might make a great painting, but if you're beginning, you have a lot of lessons to learn. And that's what this week is about, or this class is about, is just, basically we're here to make some mistakes. And so if you're making a bunch of paintings with mistakes in them, you're doing it the right way. And so if you can get students to be willing to get to that point where they will let themselves make a bad painting, basically let themselves take the risk that comes with creating. Because again, kind of going back to that uncertainty thing, it's the creative process. I don't see how you can have a creative process without there being a large degree of uncertainty in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I guess that's so it's not really like a formal thing. So I'm not necessarily you do teach about lines, shapes, and colors and all that kind of stuff. And that's all very, very important. But really, it's kind of more important to get them into the right frame of thinking, because that's what their success is going to hinge on, is if they'll let themselves make those mistakes and enjoy the process. Because if they just get frustrated, if they can't let go of that need to make something that they feel like is worthy and good.
Yeah. Yes. And they probably have gotten ideas over time of what is worthy and good from wherever. And so they're unconsciously trying to emulate that, you think, to a certain extent?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. A lot of outside factors. Sometimes people's spouses will put pressures. I've had students that were taking painting classes and that the spouses would say, "Why are you painting like that? That just looks like trash. You need to be painting this way or something." It's like, really? I guess people are different, but I think you've got to, it's very important to learn how to shut people out, even even spouses and family members, as at least as far as them having any influence on your creative practices. Mm-hmm. Because some people just will never, that sounds kind of elitist, not that they can't get it or won't get it. It's just, they're just not on that path. They're just not on that, that path of going through, what it takes to actually learn how to paint.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. So, okay. So I was going to ask you about, since this is a podcast about creativity, how do you define creativity? And I think you kind of already have, in the sense of it's being willing to deal with uncertainty in your product. I think that's really interesting, and how to do it. And yeah, I'm in writers groups, and sometimes, and of course we have to have other people read our things to critique it. And sometimes they're absolutely spot on. And other times I'm like, you go write your own book. This is my book. You're wanting this book to be in your image, but this book is in my image, or I don't say that sounds theological, but it sounds, it's my story. And, I had someone recently say they wanted me to do more with a certain character, but that character was not a major character. And I could see their point, but I didn't want that character to take over the whole story, because it really wasn't what the story was about. So, which brings us to the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is you said that you are publishing your first novel. Talk about that.
I'm kind of really nervous about it. So I started writing in earnest at the beginning of the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
When
you and a lot of people.
Yeah, because I needed something. I wanted something to do. I mean, I was still painting, but I guess I was looking for maybe another way to kind of play around, and so I tried doing some wire sculpting and a few other kind of art things. And then I ended up taking like a basic online writing course. And I thought, okay, this is it. And then plus I had the foolish notion too that, this will be good because writing's real, it doesn't cost anything to do this, but it costs a lot.
Yeah.
So I decided to go back to graduate school and get a master's in creative writing. Not that you need a degree to write, you definitely don't. But I was also thinking in terms of getting that degree would qualify me where I could teach like English composition or even remedial reading or writing. Just I like teaching and I'm fine. I wouldn't mind at all working with, students that were in remedial classes. And, I had to take remedial math. So getting that degree would kind of broaden my employability. There's just not a lot of art jobs around. And so there was that, but then I also wanted the good stuff. I wanted the content of the learning that, I could get from a program and from a, formal writing graduate program. And so I took in my second semester, I took a class called novel. It was a novel class and we had to write. And so I wrote that first draft and it ended up, I think, being around 70,000 words.
Wow. That's a lot for first time.
Well, I had written a novella before that was 20 or 30. That was 30,000. Yeah, 30,000 words. I had written some short stories, but basically it was just, to me, I don't know. One thing I'm pretty disciplined about waking up and getting busy in the morning. So I can sit down and I get up pretty early too. I'm usually up between 5 and 5:30. So I'll get up and it's just the easiest thing. I can just sit there. I can just start writing, and it's just, then the next thing I know, my wife is getting up and, the dogs are sleeping and, even if I write nothing else that day, I've had an hour of writing, So I just kind of kept a regular writing schedule. And then I finished the first draft and then I sat on it for a few weeks and then I started rewriting it. The first draft was just this hot plate of garbage. But, I had with each draft, I would involve maybe some other people. I had a friend read it and give me notes he's an independent author too. So he gave me some really good notes. And then when I gave it to my copy editor, she was fantastic. She lives in the Pacific Northwest and she just made the story. I mean, she just had these suggestions that really are, once I implemented those suggestions, it's really improved the story. And so, so I don't know, I'm kind of like telling you this in the most boring and dull possible way, but it was a fun experience. And I decided to write a story that was in the genre of what I usually read in. I usually read mysteries or thrillers. And so I thought that's what I wanted to do. So the story is a whodunit, but it's also kind of a whydunit. And it's kind of set the actual setting is in Helen, Georgia. And the two main characters are artists themselves. And then there's an art history kind of component to the story.
People like that.
Yeah, but it's got a dead body and people trying to figure out who dead bodied it. Okay,
well let me step back. Did you finish your MFA?
Yeah, okay. It's not an MFA, it's just an MA, but I will be finished at the end of the semester. In fact, yesterday I turned in the rough draft. When I say rough draft, it was we had to turn in our capstone project, which mine was 103 something pages. And then we're going to get feedback on it and give it, they'll give it back to us to clean up and make changes. And so
what institution is this?
It's Tiffin University, which is in Ohio.
Oh, okay. Yes.
It's one of those I think it started out as a Catholic liberal arts school, and now it's a private school, but they have an online graduate program in creative writing that was affordable and worked for me. And the professors have been outstanding, and then working with the other students, because it's all online, but they've designed it so that there's a lot of interacting, which I think is good for the program. Sometimes it can, as a student, it can be a grind to go on there and just answer.
Yeah.
But I think it's been a very good program. I feel like I've gotten a great education in writing because I feel like I've learned just enough to know that I know almost nothing about writing. That there's just so much more to learn.
Well, what's the title of your book, and where is it available, and when is it available?
Title of the book is Little Blue Horses. I'm publishing it through Amazon, so it'll be available on Amazon as a hard copy book, as well, or as a physical paperback and digital book.
Okay. And when?
No, I'm shooting for February 2nd.
Okay.
No, that's not actually shooting for. That's actually that's when it's going to happen, unless something unforeseen happens.
All right. Well, that's interesting that you went and got more education for that. I'm amazed. I'm impressed because, that's a lot of work. And you wanted to learn what you were really doing. You didn't just say, "Oh, writing a book is easy." And
no, I pretty much knew that just with painting, and just as being a teacher, you learn that nothing is ever as simple as, I don't know. I can't speak about every subject, but when it comes to creating, it's almost all it's not. It's a complex kind of thing you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, so Brad is our next to the last guest for this season, which has spanned 4 months and included 2 filmmakers, 2 visual artists, 2 musicians, 3 novelists, and an anthropologist who works with Narrative 4, and my producer, Clemencia. Next time around, I will go solo to share my vision and thoughts on writing and the future of podcasting, and the next adventure in my life, grandmotherhood. See you then, even though it's a podcast. Bye-bye.